Hello and welcome once more to Reclaim the Law. Today I want to talk about the 2020 Coronavirus Act passed by the UK government a few days ago, and I want to question whether it's lawful or not. So here we go, let's question it. Bearing in mind that the four nations of the UK, that's England, Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales, Public Health Group stated on the 19th of March 2020 quite clearly that COVID-19 is no longer considered to be a high consequence infectious disease in the UK. They stated that quite clearly. It's on the website, it's still there. I'll show you. gov.uk, coronavirus, what you need to know, stay at home, do not go out, high consequence infectious diseases, HCID departments. In general, guidance about and information about high consequence infectious diseases and their management in England. That's obviously. And on the last updated, published on 22nd of October 2018, last updated 21st of March 2020. And on the 19th of March 2020, COVID-19 is no longer considered to be a high consequence infectious disease, HCID, in the United Kingdom. Four Nations Public Health HCID Group made an interim recommendation in January 2020 to classify COVID-19 as a high consequence infectious disease. This was based on consideration of the UK HCID criteria about the virus and the disease, with information available during the early stages of the outbreak. Now that more is known about COVID-19, public health bodies in the United Kingdom have reviewed the most up-to-date information about COVID-19 against the UK HCID criteria. They have determined that several features have now changed. In particular, more information is available about mortality rates, low overall, and there is now greater clinical awareness of a specific and sensitive laboratory test, the availability of which continues to increase. The Advisory Committee on Dangerous Pathogens, the ACDP, is also of the opinion that COVID-19 should no longer be classified as an HCID, high consequence infectious disease. The need to have a national coordinated response remains, but this is being met by the government's COVID-19 response, which we'll just click on and have a quick look at. Stay at home, only go outside for food, health, all these things, stay 2 meters away, everything we know, right? That's the advice. What you need to know about the Coronavirus Act. This is from a website called eachother.org. The UK government has gained unprecedented powers in its bid to curb the coronavirus pandemic. The Emergency Coronavirus Act grants police, immigration officers and public health officers new powers to detain potentially infectious persons and put them in isolation facilities for a virus which is no longer considered to be a high consequence infectious disease. Put them in isolation facilities, so any member of your family can be taken away. It will also enable the government to prohibit and restrict gatherings and public events for the purpose of curbing the spread of COVID-19. They want to take away our civil liberties, our right to gather, to assemble, which is in the foundations of British democracy. It's the right to assemble, to prevent the spread of a disease which is not of high consequence. The 329-page bill became law on 25th of March after passing through Parliament. That is, notice, after the 19th of March, when it was no longer considered to be a high consequence infectious disease. So 6 days after they decided it wasn't high consequence, they've enacted this draconian legislation. 329 pages of it. In just 3 days, without opposition MPs forcing any votes and without an amendment from the House of Lords. So all the MPs were quite happy to pass through this legislation which completely eviscerates our right to assemble, our right to go to work, our right to travel for a disease which is not high consequence as stipulated by the high consequence infectious disease criteria and by the Advisory Committee on Dangerous Pathogens. no longer considered a high. So they've stripped all our liberties away for this. And let's just take another look at this. It's 329 pages long. Look at it. Look, just look down here. Look at it. This is just the contents of it. Each one of those, I'll just click on a random one. There, random, that one. Elections, postponement of elections. Look, that's only a short piece there. But when you start reading it, in order to understand it, Section 39 of the 1983 Act. Well, what is Section 39 of the 1983 Act? Local elections void, etc. does not apply and is treated as never having applied. Section 63 of the Act. In other words, you've got to look at all these different sections and representation of the People's Act 1983. This is just one little tiny piece of it, and to understand that little tiny piece, which is part 59, you have to understand that Act of Parliament, that Act of Parliament, and that Act of Parliament, and its relevance. Oh, and the Town and Country Planning Act 1990, referendums or neighbourhood development plans. Oh, Section 4B of that Act, right? What I'm saying is that our lovely Parliament rushed this through in 3 days. So what we're saying is that every member of Parliament and every member of the House of Lords understood every word in this Act of Parliament, which is now an act, is no longer a bill. I just looked at one little tiny bit of it. Let's do another pension schemes, NHS pension schemes. Look, you've got to understand the National Health Service Superannuation Scheme, Scotland Regulations 2011, Scottish Section 1, 2011, 117 have the effect as if Regulations Section 1, suspension on return to NHS employment were omitted, and in the opening words of Section Regulations S2 bracket 4, reduction of pension on return to NHS employment, the words or C were omitted. What the heck? I absolutely defy any member of Parliament, maybe there's one who can understand this in its entirety. I doubt there's even one. I doubt even the most highly qualified lawyer in the world would understand this. And I fail to see how they could possibly have passed it through law in 3 days without opposition, without any debate, without any amendments, to last for 2 years, so that we cannot assemble anymore or travel or go to work for a disease which has been deemed no longer considered to be a high consequence infectious disease in the UK. Now, a response to a threat, in order to be lawful, has to be reasonable and proportionate. That's the law. So, what my question is this act reasonable and proportionate? I fail to see it. And if it's not reasonable and proportionate, we the people should challenge it on the basis that it's unlawful. Quite simple. I think everybody can understand that. So I'm going to sign off. That's all I've got to say about this. Good night, all.